Hello, and welcome to the Oregon Business Matters podcast, brought to you by Oregon Business and Industry, the statewide Chamber of Commerce. At Oregon Business Matters, we focus on insights, issues, and initiatives that impact our shared prosperity and the state's economic health. I'm Angela Wilhelms, President and CEO of OBI, and your host here at Oregon Business Matters. So it's October, which is National Manufacturing Month, and that is a special time for us at OBI. Not only are many of our member businesses manufacturers, but OBI is actually the Oregon affiliate for the National Association of Manufacturers, or the NAM. OBI serves the state's manufacturers through the Manufacturing Council of Oregon, which is staffed by OBI Senior Policy Director Duke Shepard, who's joining me here today. Hello, Duke. Thanks for being with us.
Hello, Angela. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so OBI celebrates National Manufacturing Month, Duke, in a couple of ways. First, we've got the Coolest Thing Made in Oregon contest. That's a bracket-style competition that uses several rounds of online voting to identify, the coolest thing manufactured in the state. A huge congratulations to Bullseye Glass Company for winning this year's competition with their art glass, which I've been through their factory, and it is, in fact, terribly cool. It's gorgeous glass that can be used in art installations, whether industrial size, like in buildings, or smaller projects for the home artisan. Bullseye, congratulations. Duke, how much do you know about Bullseye Glass?
I know a lot.
That is the right answer. So very good. We're really proud of Bullseye Glass. And for those interested, you can learn more about them and all the cool entrants from this year's competition on our website, OregonBusinessIndustry.com. In addition to the Coolest Thing competition, a second way OBI celebrates National Manufacturing Month is through the annual Manufacturing and Innovation Roadshow, now in its fourth year. We also sometimes call this the bus tour. So if we call it that throughout this podcast, you'll know we're talking about the same thing. Earlier this month, the Roadshow visited 7 manufacturers in the Willamette Valley in Southern Oregon, and I wanted to chat with Duke a little bit about manufacturing generally and our experience on the bus tour this year specifically. So let's get to it. Are you ready, Duke?
I am.
Okay, great. So let's start, though, with this manufacturing generally conversation. I personally think a lot of people underestimate the importance of this sector to Oregon's economic health. Why do you care about manufacturing, and what do you want people to know? Let's start with the sectors. What are Oregon's top manufacturing sectors?
Well, Oregon has a broad and diverse array of manufacturing that maybe people don't realize is quite as broad as it is. So advanced manufacturing in metals is about 30%. So think of everything from a local machine shop with 3 welders and a CNC machine to companies like ATI or Daimler or Leatherman Tool. So that's a huge array from every part of the state. Then you get high tech and electronics, which is about 22%. And this is obviously driven by Intel and the semiconductor industry now, but we have an 80-year history of this going back to Tektronix in 1946. So it's part of Oregon's 20th and 21st century DNA, to say the least. Then we have wood products, and speaking of DNA, that's Oregon. 19% is still wood products. It's still an incredibly important part of our economy. We still make 2x4s and paper towels and toilet paper and plywood. We make some furniture, and we have new products like cross-laminated timber. So we're actually 5th in the country in terms of our concentration of this sector as a part of our GDP. So it's a part of what Oregon has been and still is. And then we have food and beverage. So we historically have a lot of strength as an ag state and bulk commodities, clearly, but we make a lot of value-added products too. So we make tea and coffee, we make beer and wine, we make all the food products from Harry and David that we'll talk about, and anything you find on the shelf at a Made in Oregon store. Those are Oregon's food products. And then there's a 10% that's miscellaneous, like Bullseye Glass, or textiles, or shoe components, or various clothes that we might make around the state.
Yeah, so that is pretty varied. I think a lot of people, like you said, maybe it's where you're from geographically in the state, but maybe hone in on one of those sectors, but don't realize that they're pretty evenly spread across manufacturing, those different sectors that you mentioned. I think that's really important. We did a study that we released last year on manufacturing and its economic impact. What does that report tell us about the manufacturing sector that you think people might not realize?
Well, first, the report's still on our website, so anybody that wants to read it should go to our website and find it under the Manufacturing Council of Oregon.
Bonus points.
But each job in 2023 contributed $178,000 to our state GDP. So that's 59% more than the average job in all industries, and 14% of our GDP overall is from manufacturing.
Wait, so it's one of the most highly productive sectors then?
It is the most productive sector. In addition to the GDP, it's 11% of the jobs in this state.
So that's how you get to the productivity, is it's 11% of jobs and 14% of GDP. So it sort of returns more to the economy overall than even just its share of jobs.
That's correct. Those jobs punch above their weight, and we punch above our weight as a state.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what I also love about some of the data in there is the speaking of the jobs, the wages. A lot of people, I think, instinctively don't realize this, but manufacturing jobs are good jobs for Oregonians. Talk a little bit about that data.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think actually, if you live in a small town, I think you know this intuitively because you have a mill or a factory. Those are the good jobs, and they always have been. So these jobs pay better at every level of income. So this was striking in the report, I think, that if you have less than a high school diploma, the job you're going to get in manufacturing is going to pay you more than any other job you're going to get across the economy. And that's true. If you have a high school diploma, if you have a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree or more advanced education, each step you are likely to earn more, 17% more than elsewhere in the economy.
Yeah, that's a pretty remarkable statistic, especially when we're constantly having conversations about how to close those gaps in wages. Manufacturing is a key to that.
Right. The report showed that the median wage is $65,000 a year, and we used median because an average would get skewed by the super high paying jobs in engineering. But when you just look at median, the dead middle, $65,000 a year does pretty well in Oregon.
Yeah, absolutely. So given the breadth and depth of the sector, given the contribution to jobs overall, wages, and the contribution to GDP, we were curious because we kind of instinctively knew what this would be, but we asked Echo Northwest, who did this report, to model out for us what a little bit of acceleration in manufacturing in Oregon would mean. We had them model 10%, which at the time was about 4 years worth of growth in manufacturing. What would a 10% growth in manufacturing mean for the state economically?
Well, over that time, 10% would be about 51,000 new jobs, which is about $7 billion to the state GDP and about $4.2 billion in personal income. And we're a personal income tax state, so that translates into revenue, and that would be $850 million in new state and local revenue.
That's a pretty significant amount of resources, both in individual and household budgets, business success, and in government coffers to pay for critical services.
And that powers the entire economy.
Win, win, win. So we'll come back to kind of what we can do to help support the manufacturing sector. But let's go back to this roadshow, the Manufacturing Innovation Roadshow. I mean, it was fun. You and I were on the bus together, and we got to go on these tours together. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the stops, and just tell people first, where did we go?
Sure. So this tour was Mid-Valley down south through the Rogue Valley. So straight down I-5. We started in Salem at Garmin, and they manufacture avionics used largely by the civil aviation industry. So, from hobbyist pilots to private planes, but also, interestingly, emergency helicopters. So a very cool and important product made right in Salem. Then we went down to ATI in Millersburg, and they manufacture advanced metals used in several industries. They make the metals that go into rocket ships and the metals that go into artificial hips, all right there in Millersburg.
Yeah, I remember thinking there that some of the metals they used were so advanced and so unique in how they were using them that they sounded almost fake because they were metals that aren't very common.
Right.
So, yeah, pretty cool.
Right. There's a really bad movie called The Core, where there's a metal called unobtainium, and I kept expecting to say they made that. Then we went down to Eugene, and we went to PacTech, which they make handles for the beverage and food industry. So think about the firm six-pack holders now that replace the kind of flimsy ones, and then other products across the food and container industry. Then we went over to Richardson in Springfield, and they make headwear and performance apparel. They popularized the trucker hat in the late 90s, and now they're making 60,000 of them a day. And we went to Convey in Roseburg, and they make production lines for the wood products industry. So more than just conveyor belts, they're highly sophisticated, highly complicated, highly computerized. They make the products that then make the plywood or the other products. They're manufacturers for manufacturers. Then we went to Carestream in White City, right outside of Medford, and they make digital medical imaging film and do a bunch of contract manufacturing. And then we finished up at Harry and David, and we looked at their entire process for all their food products, from baklava to high-end chocolates, and of course Moose Munch popcorn.
Yeah, I the smell of caramel is still kind of just burned in my memory, and not in a bad way.
No,
I don't hate it.
It was a pleasant work environment to walk through.
Yeah. So it was a fascinating tour. And I think one moment that stood out to me is the thread line here. When we got to Convey in the morning on the second day of the tour, we're in Roseburg at a facility that makes, as you said, they're a manufacturer. And they were generous enough to give us all Convey branded trucker hats, which happened to be Richardson 112 trucker hats, which we had just learned about the day before at the company, up the road in Springfield. And so it was a little full circle moment for the bus tour that I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, and it demonstrates the breadth of the manufacturers that we have in Oregon, that they needed hats. The first place they went to was an Oregon company that's nationally known.
Yeah, exactly. It's cool. So we do call this the Manufacturing and Innovation Roadshow. So you mentioned a little bit of this, but dig in a little more about some of the ways the manufacturers we toured are innovating, because I think sometimes people think manufacturing and they just think, repetition, or they think about the end product, but they don't always think about the innovation and creativity that goes into this continuous improvement and getting those products out the door.
Sure. So I'll give you a few examples. And I'll start with Convey because the product lines are interesting. So making plywood and oriented strand board, if they've got a company that is in that business and they're providing the machinery to make that product, which is laminating a bunch of different types of wood together into one product. So these are big, heavy, powerful machines, but they're super sophisticated. So they're using cameras and computers and robots. And as the wood products move down the line, the cameras are picking up in milliseconds or whatever smaller than a millisecond, what the flaws are in that product. And then they're controlling a router that cuts out the flaw and the resin that gets injected and smoothed over and dried while the product continues to move through the conveyor system with products in front and in back of it. So it's all rigorously timed, highly productive, and really innovative. PacTech, of course, they're making their products out of recycled plastic, and they're constantly coming up with new products and new applications. So whether it's the six-pack holder or a holder for carrying 2 jugs of juice out of a grocery store because you're buying in bulk, they have tons of products that they make that you wouldn't even realize were made in Eugene, Oregon. And then ATI, of course, we talked about the innovative metal products, and hafnium and niobium are the metals that I had never heard of that I have heard of now.
Yeah, we obviously neither of us paid enough attention in chemistry class, but
no, I should have prepped more for that trip, I think. But the range of metals and their applications, from aerospace to medicine, are really super cutting edge. And I mean, it's Millersburg, it's in Oregon, and there are global industries that that are important to the global economy that couldn't function without the products that they make.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was so cool to me too is we were at these companies, and all of them in their own way were a world leader in what they were doing. The technology, the testing, the engineering, the patents, it didn't matter, whatever combination of those things, these companies were all world leading. And you said something earlier that made me think about it too. A lot of them are products that people don't think about. You might think about the end result in a plywood factory, but you don't think about the machinery that makes that happen. You might be happy that you can carry 2 jugs of milk out of a big store when you're buying in bulk, but you don't think about the plastic handle that actually makes that easy to do. You don't think about the headwear that you're necessarily putting on. You just know you like the trucker cap, and then on and on and on it goes through all these stops. You don't think about the navigation system in the emergency helicopter. You just need the helicopter to work. But all of those things are critical and important, and they're all part of that manufacturing ecosystem, which is great. But it also means those companies sometimes don't, even in their own backyard, get the credit that they deserve for what they're doing.
Right. None of these companies led with, we're so important. They talked about, here's what we make and why. And then they all talked about how they're constantly working on new products. They have hundreds of patents, every single one of them. I mean, every company that we met with, none of them said, this is what we do, this is what we've always done, this is what we're always going to do. They all have new products, and all those products require new machinery, new skills, worker engagement. I mean, they are really cutting edge and forward thinking, no matter what they were making.
The other thing we heard them talk a lot about that I hear whenever I visit a business, so it wasn't unique to this tour, but is how much they care about their employees and how much they care about the jobs that they provide and how much those people mean to them, how much they care about the community and how much they want to be here and stay here and grow here, but that they're up against some challenges. So OBI, we operate in this public policy space to support businesses. And as Oregonians, we all need the private sector to provide jobs, support philanthropy, and generate revenue for public services. And your portfolio here with OBI is in part focused on policies that matter most to the state's manufacturers. So, I say it all the time. I believe that work is more important now than ever. What is the state of manufacturing these days in Oregon?
Well, on the one hand, we've covered what's really great about manufacturing. The manufacturers that are here, the work that they do, the creativity in the products and the jobs that they create. But the state economist said in November of 2024, there are clear signs we're in a manufacturing recession, and things have not gotten better. We've lost 9,400 manufacturing jobs in the last year, and according to our 2024 report, the median annual wage is $65,000. So that's $611 million that evaporated from our economy. Just that sector. Now, I used a talent.com tax calculator, which may or may not be the most accurate tool in the world, but it's, there. And that's $43 million in income tax revenue, just from the direct jobs. That's not the multiplier effects, not the people not going to restaurants or going on the road, going to hotels, doing whatever. So big picture, we've got the job losses. We're on a greater layoff pace than the rest of the country. We're lagging behind, and we're on economy-wide the same kind of pace that we were on for layoffs from the Great Recession.
Yeah, I think just like last week we got the statistic, I think even while we were on the tour, that Oregon's 50th out of 50 in the states for manufacturing job growth. And now we know it's because we're not actually growing, we're losing those jobs.
That's right.
Yeah. So, regarding the business climate, what are some of the things that manufacturers on the tour or just generally as you work with them in the Manufacturing Council, what are some of the things manufacturers mention as key frustrations? And, those listening know OBI and they know what we do, so we don't need to belabor a lot of these points. But I do think it's important to kind of tick through some of the things that we hear most frequently.
Well, let me just start by saying that every manufacturer that I've met, either on this tour or just in the job, they start off with, we love Oregon, we're from here, we want to be here. And there is a certain amount of it's tough to work in Oregon that they've always dealt with, and they've kind of just accepted as the cost of doing business, and the trade-off was right for them. But the trade-offs are getting harder. They want to continue to invest here, but it has to pencil out. I mean, they are in business. And as the costs go up, whether it's the tax environment or the regulatory environment, the lack of available land, and they have to make choices about growth or continued investment because their machines are getting old and they need to buy new machines. Do you want to place that machine in Oregon or Ridgefield, Washington? Those are the kinds of choices that people are having to make. We heard about a feeling of not being valued in Oregon, that manufacturing isn't, at least from their perception, considered an industry that a lot of policymakers are aware of or care about or prioritize. Maybe episodically, it might crop up, but for the most part, it's not an area of focus, and it's kind of taken for granted. And the relative costs matter. If it's more expensive here than elsewhere begins to look better. And at some point, you're only going to stay because of the weather for so long if this is your livelihood. That's a broad range of costs too, because while these jobs pay better, the cost of housing makes it harder to retain people or hire people. If they can't afford a house because there aren't houses to buy or rent, it's harder for a business to locate here and have an available workforce. And finally, they are getting recruited. Other states value manufacturers and value manufacturing jobs and make a real priority to try to get them to relocate or expand in those states. And this isn't about Oregon compared to Texas. This is about Washington or Nevada or Idaho. This is nearby. And Business Oregon commissioned a report that was done by the University of Oregon that talked about the number of contacts that get made and the number of businesses that get contacted. One, I think every business that I ask when I visit them, I always ask, are you getting recruited? They always say yes. But this report showed that more than 60% of the companies that get contacted by other states to either expand or relocate, and it's usually expansion. It's the next phase of investment. It's not wholesale movement. 60% of them are going. They're expanding elsewhere.
So I just want to emphasize that. So the study looked at businesses that were getting recruited, which you and I both know anecdotally is almost every business we talk to. And of the people who responded that they had been recruited, more than 60% of them said, yes, we ended up expanding or relocating outside of Oregon, putting capital growth in another state.
That's correct.
Yeah, that is, I think one of the economists later, I don't know if it was an interview or a written report or what, but said that was quote unquote insane success rate.
Yeah, they're hitting a high percentage when they're at 60%.
Yeah. So just really quickly, in our final few minutes, okay, so we know it's not great, but we have a lot of ideas to improve Oregon's business environment. We have the Oregon Competitiveness Agenda that we release. You work with the Manufacturing Council to come up with very specific proposals and ideas. But this really begins with policymakers in executive branch agencies and the state legislature. So what are some things those folks need to be thinking about? Just top level, what's the mindset that they need to have about supporting manufacturers, reversing that job loss trend, bringing more of these high wage jobs online? Where do they need to be with their headspace?
Well, before even drilling down to this segment or this policy, they just need to acknowledge the problem. So we have a problem. We're in a manufacturing recession, and that is not an episodic occurrence divorced from the policy realities of Oregon. It is an Oregon-specific problem, and all the data shows that. So if we have an Oregon-specific problem, we should acknowledge the Oregon-specific problem. And once you do that, that's the framework for starting to make other decisions and evaluate other options. And then once you have a problem, you should not do anything more negative. Do no more harm. Just pause and ask.
Stop digging the hole.
Stop digging the hole. if what we've been doing hasn't working, is doing more of the same going to make it better? No. So let's do no more harm. And then make it a priority. If we care in this state about economics, if we care about having a strong middle class, if the only thing you cared about as a policymaker was having enough income taxes to put into K through 12, then the logical thing to do is to create more jobs that generate income. So you have to prioritize it, not just hope it occurs. And then the competitiveness agenda that we have, which is broad ranging, but there are a variety of things that people could choose from, policymakers, from the small bore, just make rulemaking and permitting more transparent, to taking bigger swings at the tax structure or the regulatory environment overall. I mean, there are a whole range of things you can do and different levers that could be pulled to make a better impact than what we've got going now.
Yeah. Well, and as one Oregon manufacturer said in a video that we did with him, Oregon's worth fighting for. We all love it here. We want this place to be successful. So the ideas in the agenda, the ideas from the Manufacturing Council, all those come from a place of deep passion in wanting Oregonians and Oregon's families to be prosperous, to be able to stay here, to be able to afford to live here. And so I think there's a lot to be gleaned from that agenda. And thank you for your leadership in that policy space. So let's end on a high note, though. So what was something you can share from this year's roadshow that surprised you, impressed you, made you say, wow, and there were a lot of those moments for me. So I'm going to put you on the spot and make you answer first.
Hearing them all talk about their patent generation and the way, and even if it's not patent related, just their constant focus on innovation and new products. Like, nobody is just on autopilot. And hearing about the competitive pressures they face and that help drive that innovation, that they need to stay ahead, because none of them, I always ask every time I go on a tour, who's your competition? Nobody there said we don't have any. And so their ability to focus on doing their products and generate new ideas and new ways to create jobs, that always impresses me. And I'm just reminded of it when it's right in my face when I'm in the manufacturing facility like that.
Yeah, and I think for me, that and I'll add to it that, and this is maybe part of the innovation thing, is in their own way, whether they're making food or parts for rockets or medical devices or nav systems or hats or any of the products we saw, these are high-tech operations, and the skills, they require skilled workers. But what an opportunity for young people, especially to come out of high school or an associate's degree and to land a job working in these really, like you said, innovative but also kind of high-tech environments. I think people have an old-fashioned view of what manufacturing is like, and it constantly amazes me. And I know, you guys don't even let me push all the buttons in our own association database for good reason. So no one's going to let me push a bunch of buttons on a high-tech piece of manufacturing equipment. These are great jobs for people, and people get to be creative and innovative in them. And so I'm just constantly impressed and amazed with how much is going on right under our noses.
Yeah, could I add one thing? I think the way they're all nationally or globally competitive and the logistics that go into that, when you're located in Roseburg, there's not a big airport 2 miles away. You're trucking stuff up and down the road. You're using shipping containers from all over the world. It's amazing the things that we saw all up and down the valley in all these communities that are globally connected.
Yeah, that's a great point. I say all the time, businesses at their core are problem solvers. They're solving a problem for someone. It's a product or service a consumer needs or wants, but they're still in the business of solving problems. And you're right, logistics are incredible. And when you think about the volume some of these companies were talking about, or you think about moving one giant piece of industrial production equipment across the world, that is a feat. And so there are experts in these companies in engineering, in production, in metals and fabrication, in technology and shipping and logistics and accounting and finance and HR. And so they're complicated orgs, but again, just makes them very cool. And that's why it's an honor to be able to celebrate and support them, not just during Manufacturing Month, but all year round. So, well, thank you, Duke, for joining me today. We're going to let our listeners go, but just remember, folks, that the Oregon Business Matters podcast is a production of Oregon Business and Industry, your statewide Chamber of Commerce, and for today's purposes, your affiliate for the National Association of Manufacturers. And our podcast episodes can be found on all the top platforms. And you can, of course, find more information about the Manufacturing Council and Duke Shepard's great work and the other ways we support manufacturers and businesses from all sectors at our website, OregonBusinessIndustry.com. Thank you very much.